Who rainbow ganged the street outside the source of knowledge? They didn't rainbow gang the whole back street of the black bookstore. Was that intentional or coincidence, brothers and sisters?
They did it what they did it a week before my last lecture there. What do y'all think?
Newark, New Jersey podcast interview. King Kong consciousness. Somebody got to do it. If not me, who? If not me, who? Where my Newark queens at? I need a back massage. Montclair, Jersey City queens, I need a back massage.
The white man's development and sophisticated use of military technology and weaponry. The gun, the precursor to the modern gun, gave the Europeans a decided advantage when it came to warfare with African people. We invented gunpowder, but because African people do not come from a psychology of ruthlessness, we never thought about mass extermination. We never thought about weapons of mass destruction. So although the European got gunpowder from us, he was working on perfecting a military technique that would allow him to travel the world and lay other cultures victim to his own. We don't think like that. We believe in a world of abundance. The European operates in a world of lack. So it's not just that he showed up in Africa, he showed up with a military advantage known as the gun. And we did fight back. We have to be very clear. It was not easy for the Caucasian to take the continent. The Zulu Wars lasted almost a century. The Ashanti Wars lasted almost a century. You had kingdoms all throughout Africa that resisted the white man and with some success. The problem, again, though, lied in the technology of the Caucasian. See, once he started stealing us into slavery, he was able to study the culture, study the land, manipulate through his use of technology. By the time we woke up and realized that American slavery was not the same as African slavery, we began to push back. The problem is, his military technology had already advanced to a certain point. He had already made dirty deals with certain African kingdoms, and he was almost at a point of no return. So the original sin was that we were too humane to our visitors. That was the original sin, and we still are too humane to our visitors. Now, I just gave you the first century, if you would, of the white man's incursion into Africa through slavery.
How did they get the dirty deals with the African kingdoms?
Because they came in as friends or businessmen who simply wanted a product, human capital, for the trinkets that they were trading. The problem is, when you say slavery in Africa, remember, there is no precursor in Africa to chattel slavery. In Africa, we had slavery, but slavery in Africa could almost be likened to a form of indentured servitude. So what I mean to say by that, in Africa, slave has rights. In Africa, slaves often live amongst the family, and if they are family. Slavery in Africa was never perpetual. You didn't own the entire bloodline of a people, only that individual, and only until their debt was paid. Meaning, slavery was largely a result of crime or war. You were a prisoner of war, or you were enslaved for a period of time due to a crime. In other words, African slavery always had an expiration date, did not require the dehumanization of the slave, did not strip them of their rights, and was not perpetual. So we didn't understand the white man's slavery. But again, once we found out, we began to push back. It was the technology with the military technology of the Caucasian that ultimately gave them the advantage.
Okay, so we can safely debunk the fact that slavery, the origin of it, the entrepreneurship of it came from Africa.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, a minute ago I was saying I've given you basically the first century of contact. So then you say, well, it's been 400 years. We still down now. Africa, Europe, Caribbean, Central South America. Why are black people still under it? Because for the past 300 years, he's been controlling us through autopilot, remote control, through the subconscious, the conditioning. If I condition one generation of black people, just one, I'll probably rule them forever if they never do anything differently to free their mind. Do you follow? That's one generation. If I condition you, I could probably condition all of your descendants. We're not talking about one generation of conditioning. We're talking about 4 centuries of conditioning. The average black child born into the world believes white people are superior. Why? Through conditioning. Their parents hand down the inferiority complex. Everything from white Jesus to the snow bunny crisis to feeling you gotta live in a white neighborhood to thinking white ice is better. The white man doesn't even have to directly program Negroes anymore. The black community programs its own children in the interest of white supremacy.
So like, the more we say that someone's suppressing us, do we become suppressed or?
Not in my opinion. Okay. In my opinion, you have to accurately define your reality. And the bottom line is, at present, Europeans control and dominate almost everything African. So for me, it ain't about changing the terms. For me, it's about changing the conditions. It's no different than when people used to come up to me and say, your name is Dr. Johnson. Why are you still walking around with a Caucasian name? Now, of course, I'm Ifatunde and have been for 12 years. But prior to that, when I got that question, did you know what my answer was? You say, why am I still wearing Johnson? Well, guess what? Marcus Garvey never changed his name. The greatest Pan-Africanist ever. The late, great Dr. Amos Wilson never changed his name. The greatest black scholar of the second half of the 20th century. I can name all kind of Pan-Africanists who never changed their last name. Is it a contradiction? No. And why? For us, we're more concerned with changing conditions than we are with changing labels. Some people would rather change the label to hide the fact they don't want to do nothing about the condition. We don't believe in surface dressing. We believe you change the structure and the nature of the issue, then you change the label. In other words, do you put icing on the cake before you bake it? You bake the cake. If it's no cake, what are we pulling the icing out for? And that's one of the contradictions of cultural nationalism. Cultural nationalism always says, let's put the dashiki on. And I love dashiki. I got hundreds of them. Love African dress. Let's do the African hair. Let's change the name. Let's celebrate Kwanzaa. That's all fine. But that's all surface dressing. Okay? For us, the Pan-African nationalists, how many schools you own it? How many banks you own it? How many supermarkets you own it? How many jobs you creating? How much land you got? Don't bring me the Halloween costume. Because until you have a structure to go along with your dress, until you have power equal to the hairstyle and the naming ceremony, then all of that is nothing but ceremony. We don't want ceremony in the Pan-African movement. We want substance.
So now we're in 2023, and again, I feel like we're still fighting this fight. Do you see a conclusion to this?
To your point, we're not losing because white people are all powerful. We're losing because black people are very neurotic and ambivalent as to whether or not we want to be a part of the American empire or whether we want to build our own. There's 4 of us here. You want out the system, you want your own. DrUMAR don't want out the system. Of course I do, hypothetically speaking. I don't want out the system. I think we can make change to the system. So I'm not thinking about building no independent institutions. I believe the salvation for the American African is through participation with the Caucasian. He's not sure what to think because he believes in you and he believes in me. You see how this works? So what happens to all those Africans in the community who believe in you and believe in me? They're listening to a Cornel West and they're listening to a DrUMAR. They're listening to a Michael Eric Dyson and they're listening to a DrUMAR. They're listening to a Roland Martin. They're listening to a DrUMAR. If you listen to people of 2 competing ideologies, you may have trouble coming to your own conclusion because both arguments are good, so you don't know where to fall. And what do people do when they're not sure? They do nothing. And that's exactly why, since Dr. King's assassination, April 4th, 1968, black people have done nothing because part of us want to be free, but most of us don't think it's possible.